Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 2's long-anticipated return is finally here. Right away, it's clear that Season 2 is moving past the setup-heavy pacing and storytelling of Season 1, transitioning to something more intense, fast-paced, and action-packed. It also seems like the show is leaning much harder into the Titans this time around. But after rewatching the first episode, one thing became very clear to me. The biggest problems the show had in Season 1 are in many ways still present, and it has nothing to do with the monsters. Season 1 of Legacy of Monsters is basically two different shows stitched together. On one side, you have the 1950s timeline, following Lee Shaw, Bill Randa, and Keiko. And honestly, that's the version of the story that I actually care about. Their motivations make sense, the pacing feels tighter, and the mystery surrounding the monsters unfolds in a way that feels natural instead of forced. It also expands the Monsterverse lore in ways that actually add depth to the world instead of just throwing more spectacle on screen. But that being said, plenty of spectacle is also appreciated. And the biggest thing the past timeline does really well is how it retroactively improves Bill Randa as a character. When I first saw Kong Skull Island in theaters, yeah, I was annoyed when he died, but not because I was deeply invested in him. It just felt like a weirdly quick death. He gets eaten by a skull crawler, the movie moves on, and that's basically it. But now, years later, Monarch Legacy of Monsters expands on Bill's story in a much more meaningful way. In Skull Island, we already learned that his obsession with monsters comes from surviving a Titan attack that destroyed his ship and killed his entire crew. Legacy of Monsters doesn't reveal that for the first time, but it expands on it. We actually see the experiences and relationships that shaped him, especially his dynamic with Keiko and Shaw. And it feels genuine, like three friends who end up thrown into this dangerous misadventure mystery together. Because of that, Bill stops feeling like just a conspiracy guy chasing monsters, and instead becomes someone whose entire worldview was shaped by surviving something unimaginable. He's someone who saw what these creatures can do and spent the rest of his life trying to prove they exist. Kinda like Bryan Cranston's character in Godzilla 2014. And that's something the Monsterverse movies often struggle with. The films usually have too many characters and too much going on, so the human side of the story ends up feeling rushed. But because this is a TV series, we actually get time with these characters, time to understand why they believe what they believe, and why they make the decisions they make. So now when I think about Bill Randa's death in Kong Skull Island, it actually bothers me way more than it originally did. Because now that we know who he really was, that moment feels incredibly unceremonious. The movie doesn't really give the death weight, and there's no real closure for a character who ends up being one of the most important human figures in the Monsterverse lore. It almost feels like the franchise decided to make him a much better character years after they had already killed him off. By the end of Season 1, the story builds towards the Axis Mundi revelation, the strange region connected to the Hollow Earth where time behaves differently. That discovery becomes the real turning point for the show. It reframes a lot of the mystery surrounding the Titans, and leaves the story in a place where the past and present timelines are finally starting to collide. And that's exactly where Season 2 picks up, with the fallout from Axis Mundi and Kong becoming more active in the world. Right away, Episode 1 makes it clear that the scale of the show is ramping up. Instead of slowly building towards monster action like Season 1 often did, the episode opens with chaos, as Kong is already rampaging in the darkness, tearing through equipment and crushing people beneath his feet. It's a great POV shot here from within the helicopter. It immediately sells the sheer size and power of the Titans. And to the show's credit, Season 2 does seem to be leaning much harder into the Titans early on. The fallout from Axis Mundi, the release of a new creature from that realm, and Kong immediately chasing it all suggest that the monsters side of the story is going to play a much bigger role moving forward. But unfortunately, this is also where some of the same problems from Season 1 start creeping back in. Because while the Titan storyline is getting bigger and more interesting, the modern timeline characters are still the weakest part of the show for me. Kate, Kentaro, and Mei continue to feel much less compelling compared to the past timeline characters. Their motivations often feel overly emotional or rash, and the show still leans heavily into family drama at moments where it honestly feels out of place. We'll be in the middle of massive monster chaos, portals opening to unknown realms, titans being unleashed into the world, and suddenly the focus shifts back to relationship tension, arguments between family members, and personal conflicts that just aren't nearly as interesting as the monster mystery the show is building. Kate especially continues to make decisions that feel impulsive and overly emotional, and May still feels like a character the story doesn't really need. A lot of the time, it feels like she exists mainly to mirror the trio dynamic from the past timeline and add more drama to the modern storyline. And that contrast is really what makes the show feel uneven at times. Because whenever the story is focused on the Titan mystery, the Axis Mundi, or characters like Shaw and Keiko, the show becomes genuinely intriguing. Those characters have history, experience, and real stakes tied to the world of the monsters. But when the story shifts back to the modern trio, the pacing tends to slow down and the focus drifts back towards personal drama instead of the larger mystery the show has already set up. Now, to be fair, episode 1 also sets up something that could become much more interesting moving forward. The release of a new Titan from Axis Mundi and Kong immediately pursuing it suggests the scale of the story is about to get much bigger. If the show continues leaning up into that larger monster storyline, it could end up balancing things out in a way Season 1 sometimes struggled with. And that's something we'll have to see play out as the season continues. Episode 2 mostly continues building on the chaos that Episode 1 set in motion. Titan X has been released from the Axis Mundi and is on the move. Communications are down due to an EMP, the situation is escalating quickly, and Lee Shaw immediately pushes back against the possibility of waiting for a bureaucratic response from Washington, especially with the major shipping lane directly in Titan X's path, basically saying they don't have time for that kind of delay. And he's clearly not wrong. In this moment, the pressure of the situation is suddenly on Tim, who is now next in line of command after Dr. Verdugo's death and clearly isn't sure how to handle it. Eventually, he admits that Shaw made the right call, pushing them to act immediately instead of waiting for orders. As Shaw himself puts it,
"Some men have greatness thrust upon them."
Tim then reveals that he had actually been given orders to arrest and interrogate Shaw, but instead he throws those orders out entirely, forming a new alliance. The episode continues jumping between the present timeline and the past storyline. In the present timeline, tensions are rising within the family after the portal incident. Hiroshi argues with Kentaro about what happened, insisting that they should have never opened the portal in the first place. Kate overhears this conversation and reacts emotionally, saying that it's all her fault. But Hiroshi pushes back on this idea, telling her that it wasn't just her decision, it was all of theirs. Meanwhile, in the past timeline, the situation on the island begins shifting in a much darker direction. After Bill decides to go his own way, believing he's discovered clues about the Titan's migration route, Shaw and Keiko remain on the island, and that's when things start to get strange. They're invited to a local festival by Lucia and the villagers, which very clearly feels like a trap from the beginning. The entire scene becomes surreal and ritualistic, with the villagers performing strange ceremonies connected to what they believe is their sea god. And this moment is where the show starts tying the past and present timelines together again. A low droning call begins echoing across the island. The ground begins to shake, the swarm creatures appear, and then Titan X finally emerges in the past. So after watching the first 2 episodes of Season 2, it really feels like the show is trying to correct some of the things people criticized about the first season. The scale is bigger, the Titans are playing a much larger role in the story, and the fallout from Axis Mundi immediately pushes the plot into something more dangerous and unpredictable. But at the same time, the core structural issues of the show is still very much present. Monarch Legacy of Monsters continues to feel like 2 very different shows running at the same time. The past timeline, with Shaw, Keiko, and Bill Randa, feels like a compelling monster mystery that expands the MonsterVerse lore in meaningful ways. The modern timeline, on the other hand, often struggles to reach that same level of intrigue. And that contrast is really what will determine how successful Season 2 ends up being. The past timeline is the kind of plot that can go well alongside the monster action and enhance the experience as a whole. The real question moving forward is whether the modern storyline can rise to the same level as the monster narrative surrounding it. If Season 2 can finally balance these 2 sides of the story, the human characters, and the Titan mythology, then Monarch Legacy of Monsters could end up becoming one of the most interesting expansions of the Monsterverse so far. But for now, we're only at the beginning of the season. And with episode 2 now setting the stage for what comes next, we're about to find out whether this stronger start is the beginning of something bigger, or if the show is still struggling with the same identity problems it had in season 1. So I'm curious, do you guys prefer the past timeline or the modern storyline? And what are we thinking about the Kaiju action? So after the first 2 episodes of season 2, it looked like Monarch might finally be finding its footing. The scale was bigger, the Titans were more involved, and the story felt like it was finally moving forward instead of just setting things up. But now with episode 3 and 4, this is where things start to get wild. Because while the show continues to build on its strongest elements, the mystery, the characters, and the expanding world of the Titans, it also runs into some of the exact same problems that held it back before. And in some cases, it might be even more frustrating this time around. Episode 3 picks up directly where things left off, with Shaw and Keiko escaping as Titan X emerges from the ocean. And right away, something feels a little off. The entire setup with the villagers made it seem like Shaw and Keiko were about to be sacrificed or killed, and then the Titan just doesn't interact with them at all, which is fine in isolation, but it does make that whole sequence feel a little bit inconsistent. That confusion continues with Lucia. One moment the villagers want them dead, the next she's letting them go because no one will believe them anyway. So what exactly was supposed to happen there? It feels unclear, and the show doesn't really take the time to explain it. But to the episode's credit, it quickly regains momentum. Shaw gets stabbed in the abdomen and then immediately turns it around, throwing a savage elbow at the same guy who stabbed him, dropping him, and taking him hostage at knife point. That moment was cold. That's the Shaw I like. From there, the episode shifts back into the present timeline, and this is where the contrast in quality becomes very noticeable again. Because every time we cut back to Kate, I find myself asking the same question.
Who cares?
And not even in a joking way, I genuinely do not care about anything going on with her. She's constantly spiraling, questioning where she belongs, and saying Monarch isn't her legacy, making emotional decisions that got them into this mess in the first place, and then acting like she's the victim of it. It's frustrating. Kate is easily the most annoying, least compelling, and honestly most pointless part of this show right now. And the worst part is, every time the episode starts getting good, we cut back to her, and it just kills the momentum. Meanwhile, when the focus shifts to the actual core of the story, once again, Shaw, Keiko, Hiroshi, and Bill, and as well as the fallout of everything that's happened, the show becomes much more engaging. So in the present timeline, the group comes up with a plan to lure Titan X away from populated areas, using a prototype built around the Scarab's sound, which at least gives this side of the story a real objective. At the same time, Apex is brought into the picture, taking control of Outpost 18. And immediately, there's tension there. If you've seen Godzilla vs. Kong, you already know Apex is not a neutral player, and their involvement suggests that something bigger is happening behind the scenes. This also creates an interesting dynamic for Tim. He's still adjusting to being in a leadership position, and now he's being directly challenged by his superiors, who accuse him of making the wrong call by trusting Shaw, and demand that he hand Shaw and Keiko over as criminals. So what started as a coordinated effort quickly turns into something closer to a rogue operation. And that part of the modern storyline actually works, because it finally gives Tim, Hiroshi, and Shaw something concrete to do besides argue. But again, every time we cut back to Kate, and I just don't care. Meanwhile, the past timeline continues to be the strongest part of the episode. This is where the show really locks in. The relationship between Shaw, Keiko, and Bill is not just drama for the sake of drama. It's actually well developed, and it carries real emotional weight. And this is something that's always been a part of Godzilla's storytelling. Even going back to the original 1954 Gojira and its sequel, you had that element of human relationships and emotional conflict running alongside the larger disaster narrative. But here, it feels more intense, because you're seeing it from multiple angles. You care about Bill. You don't want to see him get hurt. At the same time, it's very clear that Shaw and Keiko have real feelings for each other, feelings they're actively trying to suppress. And what makes it hit even harder is that all three of them genuinely love and care about each other. This isn't messy drama for no reason. It's complicated, human, and honestly kind of tragic. Because there's no clean outcome here. No matter what happens, someone gets hurt. And then the show leans all the way into that. Shaw and Keiko give in to what they feel. And in that moment, you already know the consequences. Because that's his best friend. That's Bill. And there's no undoing that. And that weight carries into everything that follows. But what really elevates this storyline is how it connects to Hiroshi. Because now you're seeing the long-term consequences of all of this. That conversation between Hiroshi and Keiko is one of the most powerful moments in this episode. You can feel the resentment, the confusion, the pain he's been carrying for years. And when he says monarch, there's a level of disgust and hurt in his voice that immediately lands.
Monarch.
It's not just about the organization, it's about everything he feels it took from him. And then he asks the question.
That's not true.
I never saw him again.
Billy would never leave you, no.
I was just a child. But I do remember.
Well, there must be some other reason.
Tell me, what is it? What makes a man abandoned? An 11-year-old boy.
That line reframes everything. Because now the story isn't just about Titans or Monarch. It's about what those choices did to him. And this just adds to the continued tragedy of Bill Randa. From the sailor who lost his entire crew, men who were likely his friends, his brothers, to what would seemingly be him finding out his wife and his best friend were cheating on him, and then his eventual death in Kong Skull Island. What a horrific run. It genuinely makes me sad for Bill. It's like he was never done right. Not by his friends, not by his partners, and not by life. You want to see him win, but deep down, you know he never does. Which brings us to the ending. The final stretch of this episode is easily the strongest part. Keiko writes a letter to Lee Shaw.
Dear Lee, first things first. I do love you. I realized it that night. I always have. And I always will.
It's honest, it's conflicted, and it captures everything complicated about how she feels, choosing Bill while still acknowledging that she feels for Shaw. And then we flash back. Young Hiroshi is talking to Bill, telling him he misses Keiko, misses Uncle Lee, not knowing where they are or if they're coming back. And in that moment, Bill comes across the letter. And we don't even see him read it, we just know what it is. And that implication alone is heavy. Episode 4 opens with Bill Randa, preparing for what we already know is his final mission. And right away, there's this heavy feeling hanging over everything. And that quiet moment of him packing, of sending Hiroshi away, it doesn't feel like setup anymore. It feels like the beginning of the end. And that weight carries throughout the episode. But in the present timeline, the story shifts heavily towards Apex. And this is where things start getting very interesting. Because now we're no longer dealing with Titans. We're dealing with manipulation, control, and straight up corruption. Apex isn't just trying to understand the Titans, they're trying to control them. We see that clearly when they reveal the mind control device, and the line that really says everything.
We needed a problem so we could be the solution.
This is some real world, corrupt, evil type of thinking, and it completely reframes everything. Because now Titan X isn't just a threat, it's part of a setup. And as the episode unfolds, you start to realize just how deep that conspiracy goes. They are interfering with military systems, blocking visuals, manipulating tracking data, even using Bill Randa's research to predict Titan movement. Apex isn't reacting to the situation, they're controlling it. And this is where the episode is at its strongest, because the mystery is finally moving forward in a meaningful way. And at the center of that is Tim, who surprisingly is starting to become one of the more interesting characters in the show. Because we've watched him go from unsure, hesitant, and kind of out of his league to someone who's starting to stand on business. He pushes back against Apex. He questions their intentions. And when everything starts falling apart, he's the one who realizes something is wrong. That the system isn't tracking Titan X at all. It's tracking a whale. That moment is huge, because it confirms that Apex has been manipulating everything from the start. And for the first time, Tim actually feels like a leader. Meanwhile, the emotional core of the episode continues to be Hiroshi and Keiko. And once again, this is where the show really shines. Their dynamic is complicated, uncomfortable, but very real. You can feel that Hiroshi wants to reconnect with his mother, but at the same time, there's so much pain there. So many unanswered questions, so much resentment. And that line from Hiroshi hits hard.
I had to believe that you would only leave me behind for something as important as that.
That's not just dialogue. That's years of abandonment, confusion, and hurt all coming out in one sentence. And it makes everything surrounding Bill, Keiko, and Shaw even heavier. Because now you're seeing the consequences of their choices through Hiroshi. This isn't just their story, it's his too. But then, we have to talk about the biggest problem with this episode. Because while all of this is happening, while the conspiracy is building, while the characters are developing, the show pulls the exact same move that Kaiju fans have been complaining about for years. They build up Titan X making landfall in San Francisco. They tease it, they hype it, they position it like we're about to get a major Titan moment. And then they rip it away, completely. No payoff, no confrontation, nothing. And this is the exact same thing they did in Godzilla 2014 that garnered so much backlash, where they build up these massive moments and then cut away from them. It's frustrating, because yes, the plot device works. Yes, it builds tension. And yes, it reveals Apex's manipulation, which I enjoy. But at the same time, this is a kaiju show. We are here for the monsters too. And when you keep teasing that payoff and not delivering on it, it starts to feel like you're being strung along. It makes part of the episode feel almost pointless in hindsight. Not entirely, because the Apex storyline is important and interesting, but emotionally, it feels like something was taken away. And I know a lot of fans are feeling that. Now, to be fair, this episode isn't all negative. Kate is slightly better here. She's less poor me and more focused on actually trying to take responsibility for what she did. Do I suddenly care about her character? Not really. But at least it's a step in the right direction. May, on the other hand, yeah, I don't trust her at all. The way she starts buying into Apex, the way she leans into their plan, she's doing some real shady shit right now. And it feels like she's about to make things a lot worse. But everything leads to the final moment, because the ending of this episode is insane. We flash back to Bill and Hiroshi, a younger Hiroshi asking about Keiko, about Shaw, wondering why they never came back. And then we're back to the present timeline, where Hiroshi finds and reads the letter that Keiko sent Shaw. Oh shit. Now everything comes crashing together. The truth, the betrayal, the love, the guilt, all of it. And you already know what that means for Hiroshi. Because the question he asked before, what makes a man abandon an 11-year-old boy? He's about to get his answer. And it's not a simple one. It's messy, it's painful, and it changes everything. That cliffhanger? Yeah, that's the kind of ending this show needs more of. The cheesemate is real. So after episode 3 and 4, where does season 2 stand now? Honestly, it's a bit of both. On one hand, the show is getting stronger. The Apex storyline is finally pushing the plot forward in a great way. Tim is growing into a much more interesting character, and the emotional core with Hiroshi, Keiko, and Bill continues to be the best part of the entire series. Those moments feel real, they carry weight, and when the show leans into that, it's genuinely great. But at the same time, the issues are still there. The modern storyline still struggles, especially when it comes to characters like Kate, and the show continues to tease massive Titan moments, only to pull them away at the last second. And that's so frustrating as a longtime Kaiju fan. Because again, it feels like the show is so close to being something truly great, but it just doesn't fully commit to it yet. That being said, the ending changes things. Because now with Hiroshi reading the letter, everything we've been building towards is about to come to a head. And if the show follows through on that, episode 5 could be where the season really takes off. But hopefully, they start to give us more Titan action. And I don't just mean a glimpse or two, or we get to episode 10 and they finally give us a big battle between Kong and Titan X. Sure, it would be great, and I'll still love it for what it is, but the small peppering of kaiju throughout the show is really frustrating. They really need to amp it up. Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 2 is really starting to piss me off. Episode 5 opens in Tokyo, 1990, where we see a young Hiroshi on the phone, lulling Kate to sleep. And then we realize he's at the hospital, and Kentaro is being born. And right away, the episode is setting up something important: family, legacy, and identity. Kentaro's mother suggests naming the baby William, after Hiroshi's father, but Hiroshi immediately corrects her. And unless I miss something, that's a straight up lie. But we cut back to the present, right where we left off. Hiroshi has just found Keiko's letter to Shaw, and man, you can feel it immediately. He's calm, but he's not calm. So he storms off, and Keiko chases him, trying to explain, but Hiroshi wants none of it. He tries to bury it, saying they don't have time for this, but Keiko pushes. He asks to see the letter, and Hiroshi, still composed on the surface, hands it back. And he says coldly,
勝手に読んで悪かったよ。母さんのもんだと思うな。利用者のもんでもあるけど。
oh yeah, he's pissed. And when Keiko tries to explain, saying it was just a one-time mistake, Hiroshi goes off. And then he starts quoting it.
I love you, Lee.
Stop.
I always will.
Stop.
In another lifetime, we could be together. You okay?
I know what it says.
So did Bill Randa.
That whole sequence is brutal, and what makes it hit harder is what Hiroshi thinks he's finally figured out. He believed Bill Randa saw that letter, and that's what drove him away. But the show doesn't actually confirm that. In fact, Keiko pushes back on it, and knowing Bill's character, it doesn't fully line up. But to Hiroshi, that explanation makes sense, because for his entire life, he thought it was his fault, that he wasn't enough, that Bill didn't love him because he wasn't his real son. And now, even if he might be wrong, he finally has something to hold on to, something that tells him it wasn't me. And that right there is the emotional core of this episode. We get a really strong follow-up scene between Hiroshi and Shaw, and this might be one of my favorite conversations in the entire show, because Shaw doesn't deflect, he doesn't get defensive, he meets Hiroshi where he's at. He tells him, you have every right to be angry, but he also pushes him forward, tells him to stop living in the past, to build something for himself. And then he hits him with this line.
You got your mother back, hero. You did that. Do you really want to push her away now? Because if you do, you're blowing off the opportunity to discover one of the most fascinating and fearless and unique people alive. All because you're mad that a long time ago she just happened to fall in love with two men. I'd expect you of all people might know a little something about that.
Basically calling Hiroshi out for his hypocrisy. That whole exchange is mature, it's grounded, and it's real. And it leads into something the show doesn't always do well: resolution. Because when Keiko finally explains herself and Hiroshi opens up, we get closure, real closure. Hiroshi admits that when he read the letter, he was angry. But also in a weird way, he says it's freeing. That's heartbreaking. By the end of the conversation, you feel like something has finally healed. And that's exactly why what happens next, it's so hard. Because Hiroshi's death is the emotional peak of the series so far. And I'm not even gonna lie, this one got me. The way they mirror the lullaby from the beginning of the episode to the end as Keiko sings to him while he's dying. And Kate joins in, realizing it's the same song he used to sing to her. Man, this one hurt, and what makes it even more tragic is that Hiroshi finally got closure. He finally understood the truth. He finally made peace. And then he's gone. And here's the thing, this was an earned death. It was powerful, well-written, tragic, but at the same time, it pisses me off. because once again, this show kills off one of its best characters, and now he's just gone. We don't get more time with him, we don't get to see what comes next, and that sucks. It's like a sick joke. Every time we get attached to a good character in the Monsterverse, they vanish. Now let's talk about the other side of this episode, because this is where my frustration starts to kick in. Kate is once again the weakest part of the show. And I'm trying. I really am. But the whole drawn to the Titan thing, it's not working for me. She walks towards Titan X like she's hypnotized. We get this slow, dramatic stare down like it's supposed to be deep. I'm just sitting there like, why are we doing this again? And the worst part, this moment directly leads to Hiroshi getting killed. So now, instead of it feeling profound, it just feels annoying. But then you've got Mei, who is fully bought into Apex. And I'm sorry, this is exactly what we all saw coming. The plan is clearly half-baked, it's rushed, it's shady, and she still commits to it. It's arrogant, it's naive, and honestly, it just makes her character hard to like. And then there's the Kaiju side of things, which at this point is genuinely becoming a problem. Because this is a good story, but a bad kaiju show. We get build-up, we get tension, we get teases, and then nothing. No real fights, no real payoff, just more setup, more bait, more almost. And halfway through season 2, we haven't gotten a single real monster fight. That's insane. Now don't get me wrong, I'm still invested, the story is strong, the emotional moments have hit, the themes are there, but the execution, especially on the kaiju side, has gone from frustrating to just disappointing. That being said, the episode still works because at its core, it delivers one of the most powerful moments in the entire series. Hiroshi's story, his pain, his closure, and now his death. And that's what carries this episode. And it carries it hard. But moving forward, the show needs to start delivering on what it's building. Because the setup is there, the potential is there, now we need payoff. So episode 6 opens with a flashback on Skull Island. We see Kentaro, who's sketching Kong, but Kong notices him, and he's clearly weary of the spectator. But Kentaro is soon scared away by Kong's mighty roar. We then transition into a quieter scene between Hiroshi and Kentaro. They share a drink, talk about Kate, and talk about survival. And during this, Hiroshi brings up the time he spent in Axis Mundi. We already know about the time dilation, but for Kentaro, this is him finally hearing it from his dad. And the focus here isn't the science, it's what that time meant. Because Hiroshi explains that even though he lost a year down there, the time he spent with Kentaro after made up for it. Just a father telling his son that time together mattered. And knowing what happens later, yeah, that hits. We cut to Hiroshi's funeral, and this is where the episode should slow down and let the emotion breathe, because Kentaro is pissed, and he should be. So am I. Kate tries to apologize, but he's not hearing it. And for once, the show actually lets that tension sit. We get some setup with Shaw and Suzuki, and this is where the episode pulls me back in, the mystery of the rift. It's an eerie concept, and that's what the show should be leaning into. But then we start cutting again. Back, forth, like, bro, pick a scene. Let something play out. Every time something starts building, cut. Every time something gets interesting again, cut again. This has been a reoccurring problem throughout the show. There's too many things going on, too many storylines, and too many characters to follow. And then we get stuck with Mei and Kentaro. I'm gonna be real. This feels like filler, like we're just killing time at this point. Mei's sitting there complimenting Kentaro, and Kentaro takes it the wrong way and tries to kiss her, but gets rejected. So then Kentaro hits her with this line.
I'm the wrong Randa.
That's weird.
You prefer my sister, no?
Kentaro.
Well, I don't know. Maybe she didn't want you after all.
Bro, what? Where did that come from? That was the most randomly scandalous line in this episode. Or maybe the entire show. Man went from sad boy to instigator real quick. And then we move on like nothing happened. Now let's talk about Kate. because this is where I start losing patience. This whole connection she has with Titan X, it doesn't feel earned. It just feels like something the plot needs her to have. And instead of adding any kind of depth, it just makes everything around her feel forced. But none of that compares to what this episode does next. Because this is where I completely lose it. We get the Titan alert. Godzilla in Tokyo Bay. The music builds. The fighter jets engage Godzilla. The tension is there. And for the first time, it feels like we're finally about to get what we've been waiting for. Godzilla versus Titan X. A real fight. A real payoff. And then, right before it starts, Kentaro wakes up. It's a dream? No. What the actual fuck are we doing here? You build all that hype just to go, JK, that's not clever, that's not submersive, that's not slow burn, that is bullshit. I'm sitting here finally locked in like, oh, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. And you rip it away. For a dream? Bro, I wanted to throw something. This isn't the first time they've done this. Tease, build, cut away. Tease, build, cut away. But this is the worst offender because now it's just not frustrating. It's disrespectful. We are over halfway through this season and we still haven't had one real monster fight. And when you finally give us the setup, you turn it into a dream. At this point, I gotta say it. This is a good story, but a terrible kaiju show. And what makes it worse is what should have happened. That moment where Godzilla's tail is about to come down and wipe out Kate, May, and Kentaro, that shouldn't have been a dream. That should have been real. Kill them. Commit. Give us stakes. Give us consequences. Give us something. Because right now, these characters are not carrying the story. They're dragging it down. And losing Hiroshi just makes that painfully obvious. I'm bringing it back in because this episode didn't have nothing going for it. The ending with Shaw, the rift, that signal, that was good. Because now we're asking real questions. And that is the kind of mystery the show needs. But one strong cliffhanger doesn't erase everything that came before it. Because at the end of the day, episode 6 is a grave disappointment. An underwhelming, cheap cop-out. And if the show doesn't start delivering soon, it's going to lose the very thing that's been keeping it alive. So after 6 episodes of this show, I am sick and tired of these fucking writers, producers, and anybody else who is involved in the process of making the decision to keep Kaiju Battle blue-balling us to the maximum. Okay, this is a shit kaiju show. Yeah, it has some awesome elements. It's an intriguing story, but they completely forgot monsters, kaijus, or titans, or whatever the fuck we're calling it in this universe. The point is, they're jerking us off with these small scenes of titans appearing here and there, but in the end, what happens? Absolutely nothing. Tell me one thing of major consequence besides cheap-ass Hiroshi dying. I'm beyond myself with these kaiju shows. Whether it's Toho and their animes, whether it's Legendary now with this live action show, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to write a script. Throw it in the garbage and let the fans do something. But oh no, they're gonna copyright strike every little thing that you put up on YouTube. We're turning this into a whole different rant now. But you know what? Fuck this show. It pissed me off. It pissed you guys off. And I don't know what more we can do as a community to communicate to these people what we want out of these shows and movies. It's not difficult. Give us a good story. Yes, I love that. But also give me sick, awesome kaiju battles. It's not hard. They messed it up in a fucking anime, for God's sake. It's anime! So the episode opens in 1962 during Operation Hourglass in Axis Mundi. Shaw is completely alone, and things are looking bleak. He's buried his comrades, he's out of food rations, and at this point, he's basically just trying to survive long enough for somebody, anybody to hear him. Then the episode hits us with a really awesome reveal. Shaw wakes up to his signal finally being picked up through the rift. Except what he's hearing isn't mission control in the normal sense. He's hearing voices from the future, his own voice and Suzuki's voice. But of course, past Shaw has no idea who the hell these people are. And then it cuts back to where we left off in the last episode. Present Shaw and Suzuki realizing they're hearing Shaw's original distress call from 1962. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was so pissed in my last review about the total lack of monster action that I kind of underplayed how good this reveal actually was. Because that cliffhanger was kind of a banger. It's super meta, it's super weird, and it probably falls apart if you stare at the logic too long, but it's awesome. And more importantly, it immediately gives the episode a sense of purpose. Now we're not just wandering around with a vague mystery, now we've got a mission: get Shaw out. Suzuki gives us the standard sci-fi justification for why this is even possible. Time works differently in Axis Mundi. The rift is catching the original hourglass frequency, blah blah blah. You know, Doctor Who rules. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend it makes perfect sense. It doesn't, but it's cool enough that I can roll with it. Suzuki encourages Shaw to talk to his past self, and specifically to tell him what he most needed to hear. And right away, you can feel how weird and loaded this is for Shaw. Because he's not just talking to some random younger version of himself, which is weird enough. He's talking to himself at one of the lowest and most desperate moments of his life. Past Shaw asked to speak with Bill Randa, and you can already feel present Shaw having to tiptoe around everything. Because he can't just tell him the truth, he can't explain who he is, he can't explain what happens to him. So instead, he tells him Bill is separately trying to re-establish connection, basically just giving him enough to keep him steady without saying too much. Past Shaw, understandably, wants to know the main thing anybody in this situation would want to know. Is there a plan to get me out? And present Shaw promises him there is. Then the episode shifts over to Kate and Keiko. Keiko has discovered that the sonic frequency Kate is hearing is actually real. She ties it back to Japanese yokai legends and shows images of women who supposedly heard the same sound. Bill had speculated that the so-called yokai was actually Titan X's call, and that maybe those women understood on some level what the message was trying to say. That's a cool enough idea, I guess. But then the storyline hits a weird point that I just don't buy. Keiko starts acting like they need to find Titan X before Shaw destroys it. And I'm kind of sitting there like, when did Shaw ever say that was the plan? At no point does it really feel like Shaw is trying to just straight up destroy the Titan. So this whole bit of tension feels manufactured. Like the episode needed conflict here and just kind of forced it in. And during this conversation, Kate says,
maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm just feeling these vibrations and interpreting it as loss. Maybe I'm just lost and I'm projecting.
And honestly, truer words have never been spoken. That might be the most self-aware thing this character has said all season. Then we move over to Kentaro apologizing to Mei.
Brother, who cares? Who cares, brother? Who cares, brother? Who cares? Today,
Because I really do not care about this. It's just more relationship bullshit with no value to it. Doesn't feel important, and compared to what's happening with Shaw, this is just lame. Present Shaw and Suzuki reestablish contact with past Shaw and start trying to think through the mission more practically. But during this, they realize something important. Godzilla wasn't there back in 1962. So the answer isn't Godzilla, the answer is Titan X. So then it's decided, Shaw will put the tracker on Titan X. And this is where that conversation really starts becoming interesting. Because now past Shaw is no longer just scared and desperate, now he's suspicious. He's listening carefully, he's realizing these people know way too much. And his questions start becoming sharper. Why this Titan? Why this plan? Why do you know so much about what's down here? Why should I trust any of this? Those are all fair questions. Because from his perspective, this is insane. Some unknown voice is contacting him across time and space, telling him to go tag a Titan as part of his rescue plan. I'd be pretty skeptical too. Past Shaw keeps pressing the issue, and present Shaw has to keep bullshitting just enough to move the mission along without blowing up the whole thing. We then shift briefly to Tim and Mei on a Monarch vessel. Tim is still one of the only people in the modern storyline who feels like he's actually standing on business. He calls May out, he holds her accountable. Or so I thought. Tim then starts talking about Titan X being on a rampage. And I'm like, what rampage? We haven't seen a real rampage of any kind. That's still one of the show's biggest problems. It keeps talking like we're getting all this Titan chaos, when most of it is implied instead of shown. But from here on out, the episode really belongs to Shaw. As the conversation continues, past Shaw starts asking more personal questions. And this is where it stops just being about mission logistics and starts becoming something deeper. He can hear something familiar in the other voice. He doesn't know what it is yet, but he knows this isn't normal, so he slowly starts probing. Present Shaw keeps dodging as best as he can, while Suzuki tries to smooth things over, but the mask is starting to slip. Past Shaw also brings up Hiroshi. He talks about this little boy up there that he loves and promised he'd come back to. Past Shaw comes across Keiko's encampment. And that's the point where the episode stops being just interesting and becomes genuinely emotional. Because Present Shaw knows exactly what this moment is. He knows what his younger self is seeing, and he knows what he's about to want. And he also knows how dangerous that is. Past Shaw wants to go to her. Of course he does. Why wouldn't he? As far as he knows, Keiko might be alive. And younger Shaw still lives in the part of the story where maybe it doesn't all have to end in pain. Present Shaw, meanwhile, is carrying all the memory. So now the conversation shifts again. It's no longer, how do I complete this mission? Now it's, do I go after the person I love? And that's where the writing really starts cooking. That line coming back here is heavy. Because now it's no longer some distant romantic idea. Now it's the exact emotional knife twisting in both versions of Shaw at the same time. And for a brief moment, even Present Shaw starts to crack. He wonders what happens if he changes it. You can see it in him. What if this is the moment to fix everything? What if it doesn't have to end the way it did? But Suzuki brings him back. And thank God he does. Because then we get the best moment of this episode. Past Shaw asks for one good reason not to go to Keiko. And Present Shaw gives him 3. He tells himself that Keiko doesn't need saving in this moment. He says changing this could erase the kids that came after, Hiroshi's kids, the life that exists because of what happened. But honestly, Shaw, you know what I think? Man, fuck them kids. And then comes the last reason, the real reason, the one that matters most to him in this moment. I genuinely teared up at that line, because that's the entire tragedy of Shaw in one sentence. That's the moment where love becomes memory, where possibility becomes loss, where you accept that no matter how deeply you loved someone, no matter how real it was, no matter how much of yourself is tied to them, you still have to let them go. And that is such a human thing, so relatable, so painful, and just so real. Past Shaw stands there, watching Keiko from a distance, not saving her, not going to her, not changing anything, just letting that moment pass, accepting his destiny. And that right there is the emotional crescendo of the episode. Everything else is secondary. We get more Kate and Keiko stuff. Kate falls in the well, hears Titan X clearer, whatever. Tim and May figure out the device manipulates Titan nervous system signals. Kentaro and Isabella continue their storyline, which still just feels like filler. None of it comes close to the Shaw material. Eventually we return to the mission. Past Shaw tracks down Titan X, runs into a couple creatures along the way, nothing too major, and he successfully plants the tracker. And of course he barely escapes getting crushed in the process. Present Shaw then tells him how to get out and guides him towards the next step. And before the signal starts to fade, they get one last moment together. It's actually kinda sweet. Older Shaw, younger Shaw, one man split across time, helping himself survive. Back in the present, Shaw decides he's going in alone, and you can tell he doesn't expect to come back. He tells Suzuki goodbye, a real goodbye. Then Monarch finally picks up the signal from Titan X, and that's where this episode ends. Everything with Shaw and Suzuki guiding past Shaw through Axis Mundi is by far the best part of this episode. It's the only plotline that truly feels like it matters. It's emotional, it's intriguing, and it uses all the weird sci-fi nonsense in a way that actually serves the character. I love the dynamic of Shaw talking to himself, knowing everything, but not being able to say it directly. And I especially love that older Shaw ends up guiding younger Shaw not just through the mission, but through grief, through regret, through letting go. That's a very powerful thing to be able to learn. Outside of that, a lot of the other storylines still just don't hit for me. Kate, Kentaro, and Isabella, they aren't just filler. They're worthless. Get rid of these characters already. They don't feel important enough to justify how much time they keep talking. Tim and May have a little bit more potential, but even that still hasn't fully grabbed me. And of course, the monster action problem is still there. So yeah, if you really stop and think too hard about the Axis Mundi time communication stuff, it makes absolutely no sense. But whatever, it's fun sci-fi, I can get over that. Next episode. Episode 8. And at this point, I'm not even asking for a lot anymore. Just give me something that actually matters. Give me some Titan action. We open with Shaw hauling ass through the Australian desert. And immediately, this is kind of what we want more of. He finds Titan X thrashing in the sand, what looks like its nest. Oh wow, is the Titan going to drive the story this episode? But no, cut to Monarch. Their solution? Nuke it, of course. One guy says that's a terrible idea and gets shut down instantly. And now they're evacuating a 300-mile radius. Because in a show about Titans, humans are still the dumbest thing in it. We switch to Kate, Keiko, and Tim trying to convince Monarch that Kate has some psychic connection to Titan X. Yeah, we're still doing this. Keiko explains Shaw's plan, using radiation to lure another Titan. And I'm sitting there like, oh wow. In a kaiju show? We might actually get a kaiju fight? Fucking crazy. Back to Shaw setting up the device, actually moving the plot forward. Meanwhile, Monarch's scrambling and Tim drops the only line of logic in the room. Monarch's job is to find improbable solutions to impossible problems. We get more May and Kentaro drama. Still don't give a fuck show. Kate and the team fly toward Titan X. Immediately get swarmed and start going down. And I'm not even gonna lie, if they all died right now, this show might improve, and I would celebrate the death of these useless trash characters. Please give me something, show. Then, finally, Godzilla wakes up. There it is. That's what we've been waiting for. But no, back at the crash, Shaw finds them, and immediately you can feel the problem. Shaw is using logic. Everyone else is using feelings. Ah, a classic battle to be had. Keiko wants to save the Titan, and Shaw reminds them, this thing killed Hiroshi. They are in danger. And this plan was supposed to be simple. Him, Titan X, and Godzilla. That's it. He asks for one real reason their plan makes sense. And they don't have one. Not one. Meanwhile, Godzilla is getting closer. And for the first time all episode, or maybe all season, I'm really excited. Kate walks up to Titan X like she's invincible and somehow doesn't die. Ah yes, plot armor at its finest, of course. They tease something interesting with Apex for a whole 2 seconds and they don't do anything with it. And then, finally, Godzilla arrives. Can he save the episode? Godzilla pulls up like the king he is. Immediate presence, tail swipe, atomic breath, just pure dominance. At the same time, Apex steals the egg. Kate freaks out, and I still don't care. The fight, unfortunately, is short. But at this point, at least it exists, I suppose. Shaw and Tim are carrying this entire show. Everything with Shaw, the plan, the execution, the logic, that's the only part that feels important. Everything else, Kate, Keiko, Kentaro, either boring, frustrating, or pointless. We finally get Titan action, but it's still not enough. I'm frustrated, still watching, but barely. 8 episodes in, guys, and do I even have to say it anymore? From a Godzilla or Kaiju fan's perspective, this show is a massive disappointment. And I say that because apparently this is one of the top performing shows in the entire world currently. And I'm just not sure who the fuck is watching this show besides Godzilla and Kaiju fans. So it's odd to me that it is doing so well, because all of the fans are extremely disappointed. So perhaps the show was an effort to get the mainstream to watch the show. But again, when I ask around, I don't know anybody who's watching Monarch Legacy of Monsters. So how is the show doing so well? And the most disappointing part about that is because it is doing so well, They're going to continue to make it the same way they are now. This is barely a kaiju show. It's just drama and bullshit. It's not what it advertises itself to be, which is the biggest crime that it commits. And fun fact, this is the first video on Kaiju Senki that I didn't edit myself. I was helped by my good friend Dylan. And Dylan, jumping in at Season 2, Episode 7, was raging at how shit the show was. And even asked me over the phone, I thought this was a monster show. And that's exactly it. Even somebody who's not a massive fan of Godzilla or kaijus realizes that this show misrepresents what it's trying to do. Anyways, if you've made it this far into the video, please consider liking and subscribing to Kaiju Senki. So my final thoughts, I hope episode 9 and 10 have something to offer in terms of a long kaiju battle of some sorts. Give me 10 to 15 minutes of Godzilla action in each episode, and I think that would be a little bit better. I hope we get something big. Make this suffering worth it for me in some fucking way, because at this point I've doubled down. We've only got 2 episodes to go, and no matter how much bullshit this show is throwing at me, I'm gonna see it through. Maybe I'm part of the problem because I'm contributing to the views of this fucking shit show. Episode 9. And yeah, we're not overanalyzing this one. We open with Titan X fleeing from a pursuing Godzilla. Godzilla looms like Jaws, dorsal plate swaying. He's menacing as hell in this shot. Monarch's chasing too, and everything's headed towards Skull Island. And already, I know this is just another tease. This should be where things pop off, but they won't. He's just standing there, menacingly! Back on the Monarch ship, they're trying to figure out what's going on. They think Kate and Kentaro are being held captive by whoever stole Titan X's egg, unknowing of Kentaro's dumbassery. So then Godzilla and Titan X square up, growling and roaring at one another. But this is short-lived. Keiko tries to explain it. Godzilla doesn't need to kill Titan X, just push it back to where it belongs. Which is in character for Monster vs. Godzilla, especially before he roid raged across Earth in Godzilla X Kong. Cool, makes sense, but also that means we still don't get a fight. So Godzilla just leaves. Riveting. We cut to Kate, Kentaro, and Isabella arguing once again. Kate trying to get answers, but can't even ask the right questions or stay on the same topic, let alone letting Kentaro answer her question before asking another. I swear this character just talks in circles. Tim and May hit Skull Island, and we get some peak writing.
The only thing we can do is get in and out as fast as we can. Let's find out where they're leading Titan X, and then get it back to Access Mundi. Her back to Access Mundi, where she belongs.
Thank you, very important. Glad we stopped for that. Meanwhile, Shaw and Keiko are going through Bill's map, trying to figure out how to use a rift to send Titan X back to Access Mundi. And this is where the episode finally wakes up a little. The jungle becomes alive and starts picking off Monarch soldiers. These weird death crab creatures start tearing through them, and this is the most monster show this has felt in a minute. A good throwback to the desperate atmosphere and vibe of Kong Skull Island. And May almost gets eaten, and I was sitting there like, come on, finish the job! Kong senses Titan X and starts hauling his monkey ass towards the intruder. Back at the base, Isabella finally reveals her plan. She wants Titan X to kill Kong, and she plans on achieving this by using the neuron weapon to amplify her aggression. This is an insanely stupid plan. Kentaro, of course, gets mad because she lied. And I'm like, brother, what did you expect? So they gas Titan X and knock her out. And now they think they're in control. Yeah, we've all seen this one before. We cut back to Shaw and Keiko, and this actually is one of the better moments in the episode. They're talking about Bill and what drove him, why Skull Island mattered so much. Then Keiko asks this silly question.
I thought I did. But he left Hiroshi, and he came here. Something was different. What changed? After I was gone.
What changed, Kay? After we lost you? Everything changed. Everything.
Keiko asks that as if she never considered what her disappearance did to Bill and Shaw. But anyway, we flash back again. Bill losing it, obsessed, chasing answers, and pushing everything else away, even Hiroshi. Suzuki tries his hardest to convince him not to ignore the family he has for the one he lost. But Bill is determined and driven by guilt and his never-ending scientific mind. He always believes there's a possibility. And then once again, back in the present, Keiko finds Bill's camera, realizing this is where he died. And I'm not gonna lie, the way she reacts is fucking crazy.
God damn you, Billy! I trusted you. I believed in you, and you threw it all away for what?
Like, you betrayed this man, and he still went looking for you, and now you're mad at him? Nah, that ain't it, Chief. We get Bill's final message, and it's actually really heartfelt.
Didn't have the words when it mattered, but I hope you hear them now.
That you could possibly be in love with me lies beyond all logic. I vow to love you in this world or any other. No matter where this love takes us, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth and beyond.
Sad, honest, and it closes that loop nicely. Back to Titan X. It wakes up, and they immediately crank up its aggression. Kong is still on the way, because apparently he's running Snake Way to get to the other side of the fucking island. Then Kentaro reveals his master plan. He wants to use Axis Mundi to go back and stop Hiroshi from dying, to change history. Yeah, that's what Kentaro thinks is gonna solve this. What a stupid fucking character. And that, thankfully, is where this episode ends. Here we are, episode 10, the finale of season 2, Monarch Legacy of Monsters. We open with Shaw and Keiko trying to contact Tim after discovering Bill's rift. And right away, we get a solid character moment with Keiko, who realizes she was wrong about Bill. She thought he abandoned Hiroshi, thought the worst of him, but in reality, he was just trying to put his family back together. They get interrupted by these rolling spike creatures tearing through the jungle, and immediately realize they're running from something. We move fast. Monarch links up, steals a jeep, and finally starts acting competent for once. Meanwhile, at the base, they crank Titan X's aggression to the max. Because of course they do. Kate escapes and ends up right next to an enraged Titan, and somehow doesn't die again. Ah, the plot armor. And then, King Kong arrives. This is the moment we've been waiting for. Kong versus Titan X. They circle, and then they finally clash. Kong is beating the fuck out of Titan X at first. He's stronger, more physical, just throwing ape hands. But then they crank the aggression again, and Titan X goes feral. Now it's a real fight. They're clawing, biting, tearing into each other. It's primal and it's chaotic. And it actually feels like a good kaiju fight. But then it just kinda ends. The system overloads, Titan X breaks free, grabs her egg, and Kong just lets it go. And of course, I'm just sitting there like, that's it? That's the big payoff after 2 seasons? After all that buildup, I'm really disappointed. They lead Titan X back to the rift, and the plan works, everything wraps up clean. And then we get this moment. Titan X reaches out and touches Kate. Bro, fuck this trope. I am so sick of this. Human has a special connection with the Titan. It's bullshit. It's lazy, overdone, and it adds nothing. I have more creative writing in my left testicle than these writers had this entire show. Stop doing this, please. But then, the episode actually saves itself a little. Shaw approaches the rift and sees his younger self. In this moment, this one actually hits pretty well. There's no big speech, no over-explaining, just a look, a smile, and a salute. And with that, you can see how much pain there is in Shaw. And when Keiko asks what he said, Shaw just responds, he said goodbye. That's it. That's all it needed. We close 6 weeks later. Shaw tracking what's next, Kentaro still chasing this time travel idea, and then the final shot. The return of Rodan. Oh yeah, it's always good to see our boy in all of his volcanic glory. Well, this finale, it was a mixed bag. Shaw's story as usual was actually solid, and that ending moment with himself, one of the best in this season. Now the kaiju fight, it was cool, but way too short-lived for what they built up. And everything else, Kate, Kentaro, and all that, is still by far the weakest part of the show. Overall, it wasn't terrible, but definitely not what it could have been. It was entertaining enough for me to want to come back and see what happens next. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't have been a hell of a lot better. If you've been watching my Monarch Legacy of Monsters review, you already know how I feel about this show in general and all of its characters. It continues to suffer the same problems that we saw in the Monsterverse. There's just too many characters and too many things going on. If they honed in on some of the really interesting characters and storylines like Shaw, Keiko, and Bill, this show would just be so much better off for it. I know I've said it again and again, but Kate, Kentaro, and May, they're just terrible characters. I'm not interested, and it takes away the attention from the things that actually matter, the good stories and the monster action. And wow, that being the finale for 2 seasons of a monster show, that's the battle we got. I'm sorry, it was just weak. And they used the idea of the monsters not always having to finish one another and, Godzilla basically backing off because he didn't have to kill Titan X. I understand that, but they used that plot device to cheap out the show and not give us those big monster moments. We should have spent way more time with Shaw and developing his character and why he does the things he does and how he feels, as well as how he has decided to deal with all of these traumas throughout the years. But no, instead, we just keep going back and forth, back and forth. This show does not let you sit with any scene for more than a couple moments. It's constantly cutting back and forth, scene to scene, scene to scene. They don't just let you immerse yourself into the show, and it's a huge problem. The show really suffers from bad pacing and a lot of bad, unnecessary writing. And unfortunately, I don't have high hopes for season 3 either. As cool as the Rodan reveal was, they're not going to do anything with it. And that has become obvious. Unless they sit here and listen to the true kaiju fans and decide to change something, it's just not going to happen. The show did too well, it made too much money, so regardless of any kind of criticism that real fans of the kaiju shows give it, I think we're doomed to much of the same in season 3. Well, thank you for following along for my Monarch Legacy of Monsters review. It wasn't a lot of fun. It took me a lot of bong rips to get through the show, but in the end of the day, I get to sit here and talk about my favorite thing in the world, Godzilla. So, tune in next time, and we'll see you back for some more Godzilla Island.